Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a viewer kind of make a comment, and he's saying, hey look, you're wrong because I and my clients both, we were all able to lose more body fat, a higher percentage of body fat, while increasing our calories on low carb diets, so you're wrong. Let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Alright, I'm not necessarily going to accuse this person of being a liar because he might honestly believe that he's telling the truth. But here's the problem that you come into when you start talking about anecdotes. When we start talking about anecdotes, well, this person or that person or myself or whatever, we ate more calories on low carbs and lost more body fat. All right, when you make a statement like that, you're stating that it's not only biologically possible, but it is biologically impossible for a variety of people, for a number of people. Well, here's the problem with that. If that was actually true, when we put people inside a metabolic ward where we could measure metabolism, we can measure body fat loss, everything else, that would actually come out in the findings, meaning that there would be someone somewhere in a laboratory that would lose more body fat. They would have a metabolic advantage from doing this. So my question to these people who are so convinced of this, why aren't you writing to the researchers and volunteering to put yourself in the ward? Because we can't find people who this actually happens to when it's studied scientifically. You guys see the problem there with anecdotes? When you have anecdotes, either what you're thinking is happening is really happening, and if that's the case, it should be measurable. There shouldn't be magic involved. It should be something that we can put someone in a lab and measure and see it actually happen. The problem is that this isn't real. It doesn't actually happen. And so here's the problem with that. What you see are a lot of people will see someone else make the claim and they'll extrapolate it. Meaning they think someone really did it, so therefore they honestly believe it's real, so they'll make statements like that online. And so then they go on to say, well, you know, it's true. But how have they ever actually measured it? You know, that's the problem with these anecdotes. When you start talking to people, because I've seen people who say this, and I say, well, can I see your personal notes? And they'll say, what do you mean? Like, can you show me your daily food tracking for the several months where you ate high carbs, and then we see your changes in how you measured your body fat? See how you measured your body fat, and then when you went to low carbs, let's actually see your calorie numbers. And it turns out they didn't actually write anything down. Well, here's a problem with that. We're going purely off of human memory. Human memory isn't always that good. We make mistakes. The reality is they didn't actually write it down. They didn't measure it. They didn't actually track anything. Maybe they saw the scale go down a little bit because they lost water weight from going low carbs. They lost water weight from going low carbs and assumed that was body fat loss. But they didn't take any body fat measurements. They didn't do any DEXA scans. They didn't even keep a food diary. Because here's the problem. If they had done all that, they might find it wasn't actually true. And therein lies your issue. The other thing that you have to consider when people start talking about their personal anecdotes and they don't always track the calories, or they thought they tracked the calories, but they didn't accurately see, what they're thinking is, well, I felt like I ate more. But they're doing a diet that for many people reduces appetite. That's the whole point with ketogenic diets that people need to understand. There's a reason they're popular. There's a reason they're successful. They cause many people who follow these type of diets to consume less calories. That's not the same thing as consuming more calories and losing more fat. That's going back to calories in, calories out. They cause many people to consume less calories. There's a twofold reason for that. Number one, for many people, ketones cause a very mild nausea that makes people not get hungry. All right, it makes people not get hungry. They'll sometimes go longer without eating, or they won't necessarily snack between meals or anything. And it's one of the things that people have noted, especially really strict ketogenic followers. You go to any of these Atkins forums and you'll find a lot of those people do know that there are certain foods that will really disrupt this because they're too calorically dense and they'll munch on and go way over their calories. But if they only eat other foods and only eat when they get hungry and eat till they're full and then quit, they continue to lose weight quickly. But if they munch on a bunch of cheese, for example, which cheese is noted out of foods that are ketogenic for having some certain appetite-inducing things to where people will eat a bunch and not realize they ate it, that'll totally throw their entire diet off. All right, and that's been noted by many people who follow these type of diets. that cheese is a big destroyer on their diet because they'll tend to sit down and overeat it, and it has to do with the production of casomorphines from the casein proteins in there. Can cause them to keep munching on it and end up eating 500 more calories than they really thought they did sitting down, and they stop losing weight completely. All right, and it's because they consumed more calories on the ketogenic diet, and that's one of the big killers of it. People will eat foods that they'll tend to overeat in one sitting, and it totally disrupts the diet because it's still about calories in, calories out. And so that's the whole point. You can't just increase your calories. And many of these people have noted this. The strict adherents to these diets who follow straight ketogenic diets have noted this over the years, over and over and over. All right, so that's a big factor we note right there, is that we know that when you eat too many calories on it because you selected the wrong foods, you stop losing body fat completely. Sometimes you start regaining it. These diets don't stop you from gaining body fat. You're still bound to calories in, calories out. Furthermore, your other issue is that with lower food selection, even if it's foods that you really enjoy, when you're only limited to eating 6 or 7 or 8 different foods all the time, and in this case, meat, eggs, few green veggies, water, meat, eggs, meat, you will eventually start eating less naturally. Actually eating a really varied diet with a lot of different appetite stimulating foods actually shows to be the lowest diet adherence as far as caloric control. People who have limited food choices, it's not necessarily the best approach from a health and nutrient diversity perspective, but fewer food choices over time causes people to eat less. Even if they really like a food, they might be used to eating 1,500 calories of that one type of food source every single day as part of their diet, and eventually they start to get a little bored with it. And before long, that 1,500 calories turns into 1,200 calories or 1,100 calories of that same food every day. They just tend to eat less of it. I mean, people can only stand to eat so many eggs before they just start to taste bland. Now, you combine that with a diet that has a slight appetite suppressing effect, and they don't really worry about it. And so you'll have people who think that they're eating more calories than they really are over time on these sort of diets. And so you'll get these stories, well, I ate all these calories. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you didn't. And the other thing is, again, people will associate scale weight with fat loss, and it's not always the case. These sort of diets cause you to lose a little bit of water weight. People can mistake that for fat. So there's a lot of reasons why this anecdote doesn't work. And what people have to understand, when you're talking about these anecdotes, this hasn't been found to be true in the labs. When we put people in the metabolic wards and we have them follow different diet types, if there's any advantage, it seems to be towards the high carb when protein is equalized. All right. When protein is equalized, if you're eating whatever amount of protein, 30% of your calories from protein, 40%, that's not uncommon for people who are restricting calories, who are trying to lose weight, to go that high on protein. Whether they're following a ketogenic diet or whether they're following a really high carb diet, it's not uncommon to see 30% calories from protein. All right, that's not unusual for people who are dieting. So what we're really talking about here is then a comparison of the carb versus the fat. And the simple reality is the metabolic advantage that we found is geared slightly towards the higher carb, lower fat. That sort of diet, actually, when you put it in the metabolic ward, can allow people to consume slightly, just slightly, and I'm talking slightly, we're talking 50 or 100 calories tops difference. And that's pushing the limit. There's a slight advantage to the higher carb approach, but it's very, very small, and so small that some studies find them to be equal, and some studies show a slight advantage towards a higher carb approach. It's so small that not every study even picks it up. But the fact is, if it was the other way around, like people are saying, well, noticeably more calories, I eat a lot more calories and lose more fat, then that would be noted in the studies. You would have studies that at least showed the other direction. All right, there would be a debate about it. But the debate is whether the higher carb approach actually allows you to burn more calories, because some studies show that low carb, high fat diets give you the same fat loss on the same amount of calorie deficit that high carb, low fat diets do, and others show a slight advantage to the higher carb. That's where the conflict is. There's no debate at all on the other end. No one's even debating that because the studies aren't confirming that. They're not showing an advantage to the ketogenic style diet. They're just not. Any advantage it has is purely due to appetite suppression. That's it. And that doesn't work for everyone. There are plenty of people who've also lost 100 pounds following 70% carbohydrate diets. That's something people have to factor in there. There are people who follow diets that are 70% or more carbohydrates who've lost 100 pounds of fat. All right, it absolutely does happen. Just like there are people who've lost 100 pounds on the other. But when push comes to shove, this idea that low-carb diets are somehow responsible for much leaner physiques overall for the general population, that's not what we see in general. It's just certain individuals do well on these ketogenic diets when they're very specific with them. But when you look at indigenous populations, when we go to demographics so we can see whole populations, everyone loves to talk about the Inuits and the low-carb diets. What was noted by the researchers who originally discovered this? Back when the Inuits were following their traditional diets, were they noted for being lean people? No. They were just noted for having okay health and everything. All right, that's what they were noted for. And when refined sugars were brought into their culture, they started having more heart disease. But they weren't lean. They were noted for being chubby. So the one population on Earth that you have that follows a ketogenic diet pretty much year-round is noted for having an above-average amount of body fat. Now, there's other factors there, but you have to consider that. And the leanest populations on Earth, in healthier countries where it's not pure starvation, like the Okinawans, their diet's 80% carbohydrates. Yet they're one of the leanest populations on Earth that are not in a third world country where it's starvation induced. See the problem there demographically? See the problem when you look at metabolic wards? The advantage to the low-carb diet is not there. That we don't have studies when we study it and we can control it and actually see what people eat and measure their food rather than them just saying, well, I think I'm eating more calories. It doesn't happen. And so when you see some of these fitness experts who are coming out there saying, well, you know, I lost fat by changing over to a low-carb diet, a high-fat diet, and I upped my calories to 4,000 and lost fat. Are you fucking serious? If that was the case, we would have people do that in laboratories when we study it in the metabolic ward. All right? We don't. It doesn't happen. It's a complete line of bullshit. They're fucking lying. Because if they were telling the truth, we would be able to see it in studies. There would be research showing that this actually happens in people. It doesn't actually happen. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.